What's going on, you guys? My name's Ty Knotts and welcome to Top 5 Unknowns. 5 more disturbing documentaries that you need to see. Just a warning that this video will contain major spoilers for each of these documentaries, though they're still each worth checking out, as we obviously can't give you the entire story in such a short time frame. Number 5. A documentary known as There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane was released in 2011 and details the events of a crash that took place in 2009 after a mother gathered her children and nieces and drove nearly 2 miles into oncoming traffic. The woman eventually collided with an oncoming car, with police saying that it was the worst crash in Westchester County history. On July 26, 2009, Diane Schuler and her family were leaving a campground in New York. In the car with her were her 5-year-old son, 2-year-old son, 8, 7, and 5-year-old nieces. Her husband took a separate vehicle along with the family dog. While on their way home, Diane stopped at a gas station and McDonald's, with her being seen on CCTV buying medication. Several eyewitnesses later reported seeing Diane's van driving very aggressively through traffic. She was seen weaving in and out of lanes, flashing her lights, honking her horn, and speeding. Just a short while later, she was seen on the side of the road vomiting. At around 1 p.m., Diane phoned her brother, the father of her nieces, and informed him that she was having issues with her vision. One of the children also said that she was having trouble speaking. Her brother told her to pull over and wait, and that he would come pick them up. She hung up, and her brother never spoke to her again. Her cell phone was later found abandoned on the side of the road. Just a few minutes later, several drivers called 911 after they saw Diane's car making its way up a wrong-way exit ramp. Moments later, several other callers rang in from drivers reporting that she'd been seen driving 75 to 85 miles per hour into oncoming traffic. She's then said to have driven 1.7 miles before colliding head-on with another vehicle, which then knocked them into a third vehicle. Investigators agree with callers and say that the evidence shows she must have been traveling at least 85 miles per hour at the time of impact. 2 men witnessed the crash and ran to the collision site to try to pull people out of the wreckage. They managed to pull Diane out of her car, but certain reports show that they left some of the children as they'd been riding without seatbelts and had no pulse. The sole survivor of the crash was one of Diane's boys, who was found underneath one of the other children in the van. According to police, Diane was found with a considerable amount of alcohol and marijuana in her system. Her husband has since denied these allegations, insisting that his wife did not drink or do drugs, but did smoke marijuana occasionally, allegedly using it to relieve insomnia. To this day, investigators have absolutely no idea what caused Diane to snap the way that she did. Some medical examiners say that certain symptoms that she displayed could be explained with a stroke, but erratic driving behavior certainly seems to be unrelated to such a thing. According to public record, the official cause of the crash was ruled as driving while intoxicated, though most investigators are highly unsatisfied with this classification, as the events of that day were simply far too out of character for Diane. The documentary Something's Wrong with Diane does an incredible job at helping viewers relive the events of that day, in hopes of possibly finding answers and hopefully peace for family members. The film was released in 2011 and is available for rental or streaming on most major services. Number 4. In 2015, the documentary The Witness was released, documenting the life and death of a young woman named Kitty Genovese. Back in March of 1964, Kitty was stabbed just outside her apartment complex in New York. Just 2 days after the attack took place, the New York Times published a report saying that they'd spoken with over 38 different witnesses who claimed to have seen the attack, yet did nothing to stop it. The attack prompted the creation of a phenomenon known as Genovese syndrome, in which people witness a traumatic event yet do nothing to stop the event from continuing. At around 2:30 in the morning, Kitty left a bar where she worked and drove home. She arrived sometime around 3:15 a.m., parked her car near an alley, and began walking to the apartment door. She was then followed by a man later determined to have been Winston Mosley, who then took her down and stabbed her twice in the back. She began crying out for help, with several neighbors reportedly hearing her screams, though no one stopped to help. The only reported assistance was from a neighbor who simply shouted at the attacker. About 10 minutes later, Winston returned to the crime scene, this time out of view of any witnesses. He then located Kitty, who was bleeding out behind the building, and sexually assaulted her before stabbing her several more times. Many say that Kitty's attack was one of the sole reasons why the 911 emergency system was developed and adopted in New York City. Her attack took place just 4 years before the service was implemented, and had the service been available at the time of the attack, there's a good chance that she may still be alive to this day. The documentary The Witness does really well with telling the story and providing viewers insight into how these events unfolded. Released back in 2015, it's now available on most major online retailers. Number 3. Mommy, Dad, and Dearest is a film that was released back in 2017 but has really been gaining traction more recently. The film tells the story of Dee Dee Blanchard, a middle-aged woman who was killed by her own daughter. According to the young girl, her mother had convinced her that she was suffering from leukemia, asthma, muscular dystrophy, and brain damage. The girl lived the bulk of her life believing that she was a walking train wreck as far as medical conditions go, though one day she found out that all of this was untrue. Her mother had presumably been using all of these made-up illnesses as a way to control her daughter and keep her close to home and dependent on her. After seeing a handful of questionable Facebook posts online, neighbors began to suspect that something may have been off with the family and phoned police. When they arrived, they found Dee Dee's body lying in a pool of blood, though her daughter Gypsy was nowhere to be found, and Gypsy's wheelchair was left behind in the home. It wasn't until the next day that police found Gypsy in Wisconsin, having traveled there with her boyfriend. Gypsy was taken to a hospital where it was found that she was considerably older than her mother said she was, and that she had no signs of any of the illnesses her mother had alleged. Investigators concluded that Dee Dee must have been passing off her daughter as a much younger age than she was, along with making up all these conditions in an effort to gain sympathy from organizations like Make-A-Wish and to keep Gypsy under her care for as long as possible. Gypsy was later found to have assisted in taking the life of her mother, though her boyfriend was the one who actually carried out the attack. Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years in prison and her boyfriend was sentenced to life. The film Mommy, Dad, and Dearest was directed by Aaron Carr and debuted on HBO back in May of 2017. The film explores the events that led up to Dee Dee's murder, as well as the aftermath, focusing on the pain and suffering Gypsy was left to deal with after her mother's abuse. The film is available now on HBO streaming services. Number 2. This documentary involves a very serious discussion about mental illness and depression. If these are triggers for you, or if discussing matters like this may lead you down a dark path, I strongly urge you to skip this topic and move on to number 1. Boy Interrupted was a 2009 documentary about Evan Perry, a 15-year-old who took his own life in 2015. Perry allegedly came from a family who was no stranger to mental illness. In fact, his uncle took his own life when he was 21. Evan had been diagnosed with depression at a very young age and was prescribed Prozac to counteract this, though his diagnosis was later revised as being bipolar disorder, with him being prescribed lithium and a course of therapy, which supposedly helped him for a brief time. However, he later jumped from his family's apartment window. The film was made exclusively for HBO and has received quite high ratings across the board. The film details Evan's childhood, family history, as well as his descent into mental anguish. Reviewers of the film say that it's highly important for anyone who's looking for a clearer understanding of mental illness and just how it can affect those who are both old and young. The film is available now online. Number 1. Abducted in Plain Sight is a Netflix original film released in 2019, documenting a series of kidnappings involving Jan Felt, an Idaho teenager. Jan is most widely recognized as being the young girl who was kidnapped not once, but twice by a family friend, both at the ages of 12 and 14. She was born to an average family, having 2 sisters, a father who was a florist, and a mother who was a housewife. The film documents Jan's childhood, as well as her kidnappings, and Jan actually appears in the film personally. She's also appeared in over a dozen other feature films and TV shows since the kidnappings, and has won a Woman of Achievement Award for her role in spreading her message regarding child safety. I won't go into the details of the film too much, as it literally just came out a couple months ago, but Jan's story is certainly one worth sharing, and the film Abducted in Plain Sight is available now to stream on Netflix. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.